We have a very exciting topic today about the future of the social development ecosystem in this country and perhaps the world. And with me, we have three eminent panelists who I have had the good fortune of knowing ever since I stepped into the social development space about 7 years ago. Krishna, Priya, and Bhomik, they're dear friends also. And I let them introduce themselves, but just structurally, what we'll do in this 1 hour that's been allotted to us is we'll talk a little bit about introduction to what we're going to cover during the next 60 minutes. Each of the panelists will spend a little bit of time talking about their perspective on current and future catalysts, and the key word here is catalysts, right, for the delivering good in a better way. Weave in technology into this discussion. Technology, of course, is an integral part of almost everything we do today. And then finally, we'll leave enough time, hopefully enough time, for questions and answers. So we'd like to keep this interactive, right? Very quickly, I am a part of Bombay Stock Exchange. I run the Social Stock Exchange. I was fortunate enough to be a part of the Social Stock Exchange journey right from the beginning, when SEBI constituted the working committee in 2019. We are now in the process of constituting the first version of the Social Stock Exchange, version 1.0. And we'll talk during the session on some of the future plans that we have, or at least I have, about how the Social Stock Exchange can make a significant impact on the social development ecosystem. I also run the technology incubator at BSC. It's called Zone Startups. Right. To my left, Priya.
Hi, I'm Priya. I run Samhita. So we do two things. We work extensively with companies, NGOs, social sector, etc. But increasingly, we've been building large-scale alliances and moving to a network. I'll talk about that in a bit.
Hi, this is Krishna, co-founder and CEO of Sattva Consulting. Work in the impact space and see how we can bring more collaboration in the sector. More importantly, big fans of Bhomik and his team.
Hi, good morning. I'm Bhomik. You already know we have interacted in the last two sessions. So probably I'll spare time for our discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So we'll start by actually asking each of the panelists from their own different perspectives, what the current state of the impact ecosystem in the country is and what the future is. So I'll actually like to start with Krishna, ask him to address not just perhaps the India, but the global perspective on some of these items.
Thank you, Hemant. And as you probably have already realized since the morning, that I'm a bit of an optimist of this ecosystem. And I feel so also because I'm just coming from a couple of conferences in Europe. And I can't tell you how proud I feel to be part of this Indian ecosystem. So a big round of applause to everybody. We are so far ahead, as a CSR ecosystem, as the non-profit innovation, entrepreneurship. It's just phenomenal. And I think there's truly an opportunity for India, to lead the world in this, in this sector. So I'm very proud of that. But coming back, to today, it's been I think, different phases of evolution that has happened, in this ecosystem. Obviously, one of my colleagues keeps calling it reluctance compliance in the beginning, and everybody said, do we have to do it? Why do we have to do it? I think today accepting, the opportunity that exists, because of this ecosystem that has come together. To summarize, I want to quote, a recent incident where one of our partners, a Japanese company, a new CEO took over as South Asia, and he wanted to meet. And when I met him, he said, "Why not just add another bit of tax? Why do all this stuff?" I said, "Firstly, if that was done, you would not be meeting me today. We would not be meeting, and your team every month at a leadership team meeting would not be discussing India's development." as an agenda. You would have just passed it on to someone else. So the fact that now you have so many people sitting in that room discussing India's development, even for a little bit, thinking about innovation, thinking about how you can contribute, is really the opportunity, and why it's not just a tax. And we need to also remember, while from a sector point of view, a lot of us who grew up in the social sector, the CSR amounts look really phenomenal. I think what the MCA already reports, that's been spent 2 years ago, is 1.53 lakh crores, and Bhomik tells me it's now, by this March we would have crossed 2 lakh crores. That's a really large number to come into an ecosystem that used to be much smaller, before. But in a country like India, we also need to remember that the last month GST collected was 2 lakh crores, 1 month, right? So a decade of CSR is equal to 1 month of GST, right? So hence, what is the role, of CSR? And I think that is the key question. While the learning has been, we've come out of compliance, we've come out of thinking about how can we add value to society. There's now maturity in the ecosystem to say, I can do good and also leverage it for my own, business, brand, ecosystem. I think that journey we've covered. Now, I think the next part of our journey is really going to be, how do we really look at it, in terms of creating and using this, money that we have in terms of a multiplier, and not just from a programmatic lens. And I'm sure Priya has many examples for all of us to learn from. But that's really the question of the future. I also feel, as an ecosystem, we need to come together, and that's really for Priya, Bhomik, me, and many of us, who I think need to work harder together to come together on knowledge, on data. We still, I think, reasonably lagging behind, one place in, like you said, standards globally. Hemant, you mentioned that very nicely in the morning, but also measurement. Our measurement is still not there as an ecosystem. We are not measuring impact as effectively, as cost efficiently as possible. It's too expensive today. Again, there are no standards. So as an ecosystem, if we need to kind of bring, data and knowledge and measurements, to evolve and move to the next level, we can make sure that this 2 lakh crore or 50,000 crores per annum dream that we have can actually unlock impact of 5 lakh crores. I think that's really the future of CSR. And I think we all need to kind of think about how do we do that and not just run projects. And I will say we've done well as an ecosystem last 10 year funding projects. We need to solve problems. I think we need to be able to say we are done with this. 20 years from now, CSR should be wondering, what do I do in India? Because everything else has been done now. That should be the hope that we have.
Yeah, thanks, Krishna. So when the CSR Act came in, CSR was like writing a check because somebody's asked you to. But as Krishna is pointing out, one, it's becoming more and more a part of the corporate DNA, adding value to the company and to the society. Second, it's a stage for us to actually make a global example of the way social development should be done, as well as use it to leverage a larger pool of capital, not just the CSR money itself, but can it be used to unlock a larger pool of capital. So I'm going to ask actually Priya to talk a little bit more about some of these things around unlocking more capital, collaboration, etc. Yeah.
Thanks, Hemant. And if I can just add to what Srikrishna said, right? As I think about the next 10 years, I think about NGOs, companies, right? Philanthropic organizations, catalysts like the stock exchange as being catalytic. For the simple reason that it can be India's decade, it can be India's century, or it may not be India's decade and it may not be India's century, right? It depends on a few things that the country does and that all of us to do collectively. Are we able to create meaningful jobs that lead to prosperity? Are we able to really catalyze the entrepreneurship boom that India is already seeing? Are we able to leverage the transformational power of the DPIs that the Indian government is not just pushing in India, but is becoming inspirational for the world over? If we don't capitalize on all of this, right, we are seeing a very different future. Yesterday, Mr. Tiwari of NSDC was talking about how every fourth employee in the world is going to be an Indian. So this is not just the next 10 years of India doing well for Indian citizens, but India really being able to transform the world. And that's really what the G20 has been about. So I want to just help you imagine a future that we are constructing with a set of partners, right? So for the last few years, as we were thinking about CSR, it was collaboration amongst NGOs and companies, or companies and government, or NGOs and government. Now, what happens if the following takes place? Just to get a sense of who's in the room, how many people from NGOs or social organizations? Thank you. How many people from the CSR ecosystem? A few, thank you. And how many from the government? A few, great. So let's take the example of any of the NGOs here working on livelihoods, right? So let's say you are training a large number of women on certain skills. Now, what happens if those same women actually get connected to SIDBI to ensure, and let's say that they're entrepreneurs, let's say they're artisans, right? What happens if those women get connected to SIDBI that's able to come in and help them formalize their businesses? What happens if those same women get access to NSDC's new schemes and get access to many, many more skills which are not just trade specific, but also help the artisan become an entrepreneur? What happens if the same woman is now able to get a credit guarantee from CGT-MSC, which is part of SIDBI, and therefore is able to get a bank loan for the first time? What happens if the same woman now is supported to go into ONDC and actually get access to market linkages? What happens if the same woman is able to get connected to her nearest common service center and get access to government social security schemes? Should this woman today go to every single entity one-on-one? Or should this woman have a one-stop window to ensure that all of these opportunities are brought to her on her cell phone or the cell phone of her husband or whoever it is who's controlling the asset, right? It's upon us to be able to do that. So to give you a sense, what are we doing? We're actually partnering with many, many companies, because think about the corporate sector. Whether it's artisans or farmers or retailers or truck drivers, they're very much part of your business and CSR ecosystem. The same thing that you as NGOs want, the companies want to, and Srikrishna talked about, everyone actually winning out of this relationship, right? So how do we create a network effect so that the following happens? A company stakeholder automatically gets upskilled because of NSDC, gets formalized because of SIDBI, gets access to bank linkages because of CGT-MSC, gets the market linkages, gets the social security services, and therefore everyone receives the opportunities that they need in the context that they find themselves in based on their aspirations for the future. It is up to us to construct all of that together. And to give you a sense of how this is all coming together, right? Because let's think about how everyone wins here. Of course, the individual wins because so many things happen and their incomes actually get doubled or enhanced very significantly. Now, NSDC today, when they talk to the Prime Minister's office, say, hey, we've skilled people. But NSDC doesn't really know whether the same people actually were able to get loans or whether they were able to improve their businesses. In a system like this, they find out, right? Today, banks are not willing to lend to a lot of the people that you serve because they're new to credit. What does it take to take out risks? So I'll give you a simple example of a project that we're doing. I don't know if Soumya's in the room, but 361 Foundation really has been catalytic. So we've partnered with them and USAID to use 2.5 crores to unlock 500 crores of lending to individuals who are new to credit. The 500 crores can easily go up to 10,000 crores because the allocation is there. What does it mean to bring a new to credit customer? It means somebody who has no bank account, who has no ability to actually get any money, receives money for the first time. So the 2.5 crores that organizations are putting together are unlocking very, very significant amount of capital. That's a 200x leverage for a CSR who puts the money together. So what I'm painting is the vision of massive collaboration where everyone wins, right? The banks win because they're able to reach out to customers that they never reached out to before. Markets win because they now have access to customers and sellers that they didn't have before. Government institutions win because they're able to collaborate very effectively with the private sector and the social sector, right? It's a win, 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 win. And it only happens when you're able to orchestrate this collaboration in a way that every actor understands their role, leverages their strength, and truly benefits from the network experience. I want to just give you one more example and then I'll pause. So 3 years ago, when we were staring at the pandemic, right, and all of you sort of were part of that, which is just the desperation, the suffering had reached a stage that none of us had encountered before. Resources were minimal. And so, in some sense, the challenge for us was how do you take tiny amounts of money and create the most amount of change? So, we started with something really simple, and we've partnered with a lot of you actually. So, we started with something called a returnable grant, right? A returnable grant just says we give money to somebody, they use it, they pay it back, and it goes to somebody else. They pay it back, it goes to somebody else. So, we started this in April 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. And, we thought if you're going to give money to people in the middle of the worst time of their lives, and if they don't have to pay it back, of course they're not going to pay it back, right? So we've done about 40,000 returnable grants in the worst time that India has seen. And can you just take a guess as to what do you think, how much money came back? 10%, 20%, 30%, right? Well, not all of it. We went through a crisis. Remember, this is the worst moment of people's lives. 40,000 returnable grants later, with 27 partners ranging from Seva, Mandeshi, Tisar, the social, everybody from sector skill councils to CSCs. So really many, many, many more organizations we funded, farmers and artisans and truck drivers and contractors and street vendors. And it doesn't matter who you give the money to, and it doesn't matter how you give the money. 93% of the money came back, right? Time after time after time. And so we actually took this data and we went to the banks and we went to SIDBI and we said, here is an NTC person. Here is a person who is invisible to all of us today because they don't have a digital history. They don't have any ability to actually show their worth to anybody else. And from that 40,000, the 40,000 people enabled us to create this credit guarantee facility, which is now enabling us to partner with SIDBI and NSTC and ONDC. It was those 40,000 people. If we had not trusted them, if we had not worked with them, if they hadn't shown their capability to take money and give it back, no questions asked, none of these institutions that I'm talking about would have been convinced, right? So to end, I think what we as a social sector have are really deep relationships with people who are inherently trustworthy. They are good, hardworking individuals. They don't need charity, they need opportunity, right? And it is really for us to construct partnerships in a way that we are giving them that opportunity today, tomorrow, whenever it is that they need, and that opportunity for them, for us, for the institutions that we work with, for our country. And nothing that I'm talking about today is unique to India. That same woman artisan can be in any part of the world, right? This is at the core of humanity. So what I'm excited about the next 10 years is just how much optimism, commitment, hard work, collaboration, innovation that we see on a day-to-day basis amongst every kind of partner that we encounter. Really a lot of you sitting here in the room. And so, Hemant, I am very optimistic about our next 10 years, really because of the phenomenal work that we do every day as a sector in a highly under-resourced, extremely challenging environment.
Thank you, Priya. That was very, very well said. And I think, just taking off from what you touched upon, a lot of collaboration, right? Innovative financial instruments. And like I was saying in the beginning, I think the social stock exchange has a key role to play in enabling stitching together some of these instruments, getting a larger pool of funders and new pools of funders to the table who can participate in this exciting journey. But however, all of this exists inside a regulatory framework, right? Ultimately, the regulation has to act not only as an enabler, but also as a catalyst in terms of making all of this happen. So, Bhomik, if I can ask you to share your thoughts on that.
Good. Thanks, Hemant. And first of all, those who are sitting on the other side, yeah, Sattva, Samhita, and CSRBOX. If you take the list of top 500 companies in India and discount of PSUs, probably these three organizations are working with almost 60% of these 500 companies. So what I want to say, just hold on. What I want to say is that all three of us have been probably in this ecosystem when the CSR become mandatory, and probably it was just a bill, and we have seen that entire journey of bill becoming the act. So all of us has really lived with this entire journey of the corporate social responsibility becoming mandatory. Beyond that, all the three organizations are working with large philanthropy to smaller philanthropy to family offices to multilateral, bilateral donor organizations for last couple of years. So this is probably coming from the sectors, people who have really been passionate about driving the sector towards the right direction. And we all work a lot towards sensitizing boardrooms and decision makers to identify right areas of social investment. So big round of applause for not for myself, but at least for Sattva, Samhita, and then I'll come to Hemant separately because I think Hemant has been in this sector for last 12 years, especially driving the entire fraternity on certain direction. And we have been interacting on different fronts since the days of BAC Samman and others. So all of us really have that internal heart and soul and everything for this sector. So if anything happens wrong, even the decision making at the boardroom or even at the some point at the foundation level, we really feel bad about it, that this should have not happened. So that's why we probably are a very different organization when you compare to any other consulting firm. And why I'm saying as a narrative that while some of us have for-profit model for our as an organization, this is very different model from the typical management consulting firm. And that's how we are trying to set the narrative for entire social sector funding going towards right direction. Now coming to what Hemant is trying to say, and Hemant has asked me about how the last 10 years and probably what transition we are seeing in current stage of 10 years in the 10th year of CSR compliance and how it is ultimately influencing the other kind of social impact funding. So I will try to touch upon a couple of points based on our work with companies and the data that we have been
You
recording.
want to talk about the survey results?
Yes, so I will try to connect both. So I have spoken about a couple of insights from the report which we have launched yesterday. But two key narrative which are coming in this 10th year is that dust is settling down about the CSR. Companies, boards, everybody is very much settled in terms of what they want to prioritize, how they want to work on, and what kind of modalities they want to put in place. The transition phase which is happening internally is about how do we look at 3 to 4 checklists in terms of while identifying one project or program. I'll cite one example. We work with one of the Korean client, a very large one in India. 3-line email that we get from the CSR leadership in India is that the board is focusing on 3 pointers. One, India's national priority. That means alignment with the government priorities. Second, kind of social impact communication that can be done around the projects and program. Third one is about how do ultimately we look at entire peer and strategic advantage that we'll be able to build through the project and program. So one, look at what our peers are doing in the sector and how do we create more strategic project and program. So this is technically what I'm talking about, dust settling, where companies are very much sorted about these 3 things are definitely has to be there when they are prioritizing CSR projects and program. And this CSR funding, because it has become almost 40-50,000 crore now, every year it's going to become 40-50,000 crore in next 2-3 years. This is also influencing other kind of philanthropic or non-CSR funding in India. Because many of the philanthropic organizations are trying to partner with large CSR foundation or other kind of corporate social responsibility programs where they can create some hybrid funding models or they can become the catalyst for investment. For example, we talk about admin a lot, like admin cost of the projects and program. So many of the philanthropic organizations are thinking that if they can fund for admin cost of one large program, can then the CSR invest entire fund towards programmatic funding. So this is probably because this large pool, we have never seen, we were imagining 11,000 or 20,000 crore range when we were talking about CSR funding in 2014, 2015. It's going to reach 50,000 crore in next 2-3 years. It's a huge amount. So definitely it's driving a lot of narrative that how social impact ecosystem can be built for next 10 years. And after COVID, we are seeing there has been a lot of push towards aligning with government priorities. It's settled. 55% of the companies we interacted in last 2 months for the survey, 55% of they've agreed that it has to, each and every project that we are doing, at 55% of them say that it has to have government partnership. So there's a priority, which is about execution model. While you look at national priority as a program design, it's already settled in many of the large companies that it has to be in alignment with what government is thinking for next 5 years. Many large companies get mandate directly or indirectly, and I should not talk about in open forum, but I take that liberty, that if you want to leverage for any social project, if you want to leverage the systemic strength, which ultimately helps you with 100x resources, you have to align with government priorities, otherwise it doesn't work. So definitely, each and every program which most of the large companies are thinking, the priority remains that they have to align with national priorities for next 5 years. That's where the agenda is set from the boardrooms for identifying priorities. I was talking about technology-driven interventions in India. Now, if you look at press release coming from large tech companies in last 60 days, you will find that each and every large company which exists in India or which operates in India, having headquartered in US, each and every company has spoken about future skills, AI labs, or something about technology in classrooms. So you can understand how the narratives are being set for social sector as well. That's where probably we need to understand that the sector is not cannot operate on its own. We have to really understand government priorities. We have to understand how we as a non-profit are also evolving with the sector. 2, 3 key elements which came out in our survey was that non-profits, 60% of non-profits, 68% of non-profits do not have capacity to communicate about their projects and program or report about the projects that they are implementing. And that's probably, we worded it like not so good experience with non-profit for them. 40% of them say that, companies are saying that 40% of my partners did not have technical capacity for the projects which we have given. So this is probably eye-opener for us as a sector, that what we were doing for last 10 years and where we want to be next 10 years. This sector requires a lot of internal capacity building as well and agility. And we have been talking about this agility a lot because ultimately you are delivering for someone else compliances or someone else priorities defined by their decision makers. So what you are working on and what your priorities are probably will not matter a lot. What will matter that what kind of project and program priorities are defined and on which you are going to deliver a lot. I will take a pause here probably because I want Sattva and Samhita to speak more. I have spoken yesterday. So yeah, Hemant.
Thank you, Bhomik. And I was going through the CSR survey, some very eye-opening things there. Some of them contradictory to what I think the general thinking is. Very interesting. Like I was saying in the beginning, technology obviously plays a crucial role in all our lives as of today, at an individual level as well as at an aggregate level. And therefore, it has to be a catalyst for the social development sector also. How you guys see, my panelists see that playing out, I would love to hear your thoughts. I'll start with Krishna.
Yep, thanks, Hemant. And I think I want to start off a little bit on data and then come to technology, because I think data is something that we are, as a sector, very poor at, right? And I think if we have to kind of really contribute as a meaningful ecosystem, to India's development, like Priya was saying, we have to work almost like the mainstream, and data becomes very, very critical, for us. For example, if I were to ask you, coming from BSc, who are the top 20 companies in India by market cap, by revenue, by PAT, you will be able to give out those lists. But if I ask this group, whose probably collective experience in the non-profit sector is few hundred years, and say, hey, who are the top 20 non-profits in the country by annual budget? And stack rank, not guess. You need to give me number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. I don't think that exists, right? CSR, we have the data now. Thanks to the MCA, we are able to now say this is how big the CSR is. The global philanthropy data is available, because the DAC, the OECD DAC presents the data. Yeah, if you look at the top 40 philanthropists globally, you get the trends, from a global perspective. And that's the analysis in the last 1 year that we have done. We have not yet published this data. We feel it's dangerous to publish this data, the top 20 kind of stuff. So we've kept it more internal, at this point. But let me give you some insights from a data perspective. The lowest estimate, if I keep multilateral, bilateral agencies out, government spending out, if you just look at CSR, HNI giving that is existing, some data that exists, which is also not very complete in India. If you take retail giving, some of the data that exists, if you take the OECD DAC data that exists of how much philanthropy comes from global philanthropy ecosystems like the Gates Foundation and Omidyar and many others, it's the minimum number is 50,000 crores in India. Yep. Now you look at, say, how big is the NGO sector in India? Because there is also if you look at the total economy of the NGO sector, how big would it be? And our current, when we have now analyzed the top 200 NGOs, by annual report, and we've looked at 3-year trends and stuff internally, and we because there's no such list, we believe it's about 95% confidence. Maybe we are 5% wrong. But with 95% confidence, we can say these are the 200 NGOs that are top 200 NGOs in India. It's alarming. Only 8,000 crores is absorbed by these 200 NGOs. And by the time you come to the 200th NGO, you're below 12 crore of annual budget. Which means there's a steep decline, in terms of numbers. Which means we are a home of many, 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 many small non-profits. Right? Clearly, India's non-profit sector has a growth problem. They are not able to absorb. Now, that's not a sector problem of the NGO sector. Collectively, none of us have invested in the growth of NGOs. And now when people say, oh, they're not able to absorb, welcome to the party, right? Because unless we invest, you can't expect the sector to grow. If you're only looking at NGOs as extensions of compliance and getting your spend done, it's not going to happen. So how do we then invest in the non-profit ecosystem? So if NGOs are only, and our estimate is if you extend that argument of 200 NGOs to the rest, about 15,000 crores can be absorbed by the entire NGO sector out of the 50,000 crores, right? And the interesting thing is the 50,000 crores is growing at a CAGR of 10-12%, whereas the NGO sector, based on the data that we have, is growing at 3%, which means it's only going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Why do you think there are logos like IIT Madras, IIT Kanpur on this screen? What are they doing in a CSR NGO conference? Right? Because they are also here for India's development. So as philanthropy, CSR is 30% of my bucket. The rest is research, academic institution, long-term investments, many of them getting into self-implementation. Interestingly, the top CSRs in the country already have started crossing 1,000 crore. The top NGOs of the country, above 500 crores, there's only one NGO. Right? So if you start looking at data and you now dig deeper into sectors, who's in the agriculture sector, who's working in water, you start realizing there's a serious problem. It's shameful for us how much we, as an ecosystem, focus on Northeast and some of the aspirational districts. Right? So if you start analyzing data, there's still a lot of work to be done. So a big role for all of us from a data, technology, and hence technology becomes, because not all of us can be everywhere. Technology is a great, leveler from that perspective. I think there's an opportunity to bring data-led philanthropy, data-led decision-making in CSR, in non-profits. If you're not making decisions using data, I don't think that's the future, and you may not even, scale up to that extent. And if you don't have technology in your roadmap as an NGO, my suggestion is, abhi band kar do, retire ho jao. There's no future, right? Absolutely no future. And I think that's very critical for us to realize that that's an important element. And you have to be able to argue with your donors that this is important for me. We also have to get out of this relationship that donors are NGO-led or NGOs are donor-led. Both are dangerous. Okay? If NGOs are saying, I'm doing this because my donor asked me, and if the CSR is saying, I'm doing because an NGO said this is what they want to do, both are dangerous. The friction, the positive, healthy friction that exists in co-creating between these two ecosystems, I think is really the opportunity. But there will be a lot of other players who will come, which we need. Today, you cannot solve a lot of the agri, health, climate problems without technology and research institutions and many others coming to the fore. Right? Some of the work that IIT Madras is going, I don't know if Kaviraj and gang are here, it's just phenomenal in terms of, the impact that it can create in society, and not necessarily only an NGO route to create impact. So I think that's the story that's emerging in the next 10 years, that all of us, not just NGO and CSR, but everybody in India will have to work for India's development. And that is only possible if the common language is data. And for common language to be data, technology is then. So that's the way, we would look at it.
And thanks, Krishna. And It's amazing how some of the outcomes of the result of the survey tie in with the data that you're talking about in terms of the NGO capabilities, right? Priya, your thoughts on technology data, how that can act as a catalyst?
Yeah, no, I really loved all the points that Srikrishna made, right? So this year we told ourselves that we want to double incomes of 10 million workers and entrepreneurs. And we would do it collectively along with all of our NGO partners, our social enterprises, government, CSR, and philanthropic partners. And so when we said 10 million workers and entrepreneurs and we wanted double income, the first question is, where are these 10 million people? Where is the data to even find them, track them, support them? Then when we said income, well, do you think that your Sabzi Wali, if you go and ask her, kitna kamaya aaj, do you think she'll be able to tell you the difference between her revenue and her profit? She won't, right? So if she doesn't know what her income is, how do we know what her income is? And when we say we want to double incomes, how do we know what doubles income? Is it access to credit? Is it better skills? Is it market linkages? Is it tech integration? We don't know the answer to that, right? And so as we started unpacking even our own ambition, right, we said data and technology is vital to solving this problem at scale. And so there are three ways we're thinking about technology, right? Who are these 10 million people? What technology do they use? Do they use a smartphone? Do they use an ordinary phone? Do they even have a phone? Do they rely on somebody else, right? So what is the digital access for the 10 million people that we are thinking about? Second, to Shri Krishna's points, who are the partners who are currently serving them? What is the NGO's capability to onboard somebody, track them? What is the government's capability to onboard somebody and track them? What is the financial institution's capability to onboard and track them? What information should be shared? What should not be shared? What information is yours versus what information is the participants versus what information is the ecosystems, right? And third, at the highest ecosystem level, and the reason we said 10 million is because the 10 million is a pilot, right? If we get the 10 million right, and if all of the partnerships that I talked about briefly and more are able to succeed, the success is measured by data. If you get the 10 million right, you're creating the foundation for the next 500 million. And therefore, the technology architecture has to be built accordingly. So those of you who may have heard Sanjay Purohit, who was part of the Aadhaar journey, he says, an elephant is not 10,000 mice, right? When you're trying to create a mouse, the mouse's DNA is a mouse DNA. The elephant's DNA is an elephant's DNA. You cannot create technology to serve 10 million people and then believe that you can do a 10x. It doesn't work like that. Aadhaar was built for the nation. Aadhaar was built for billions of people, right? And so the third perspective on technology is how do you really use the digital public infrastructure in a way that you're able to plug and play, right? I talked about 6 institutions. The success comes when you have thousands of such institutions supporting India's base of the pyramid and middle India at scale and doing this through data. I mean, why are banks looking to invest in the 10 million people that I talked about, right? Only because of the data that they will get. And so I think, to summarize, 3 things are important as we think about technology, right? Who is the user? What is their context? What's their reality? Are they going to use it? Is someone else going to use it? And therefore, it needs to be so intuitive and friendly. Second, data has to be owned by that person. It is, that woman seller is not, that Sabzi Wali is not my Sabzi Wali or the NGO Sabzi Wali. She is her own person. And the question is, how do you use data in a way that she can self-maximize? We are notoriously, we're all at fault, right? How many times your impact assessment data is shared with whom exactly? With your donors. Do you ever go back and share it with your participants? Do you ever go back to your farmer, your artisan, and say, we did this for you. When you got this, you did X, but your neighbor actually did Y, or she did 2X. Do you know why she did 2X versus you did 2X? When do we ever go back and take the data back to the people that we serve? And so creating data that allows individuals to make their own decisions is going to be vital. So we don't call our 10 million people beneficiaries. We call them participants. We want them to be customers and we want them to be change agents. That's the only way for it to be sustainable. That farmer and that artisan and that street vendor needs to want to improve her income, and she needs the data to enable that to happen. And the last is the data is so vital for policymakers, for the private sector, for banks, and for everybody trying to solve the problem of India's poor, because they need to see them as a viable market. They cannot see them as beneficiaries. Otherwise, we're talking about 50,000 crores of CSR money. We are not talking about the $50 billion of money that needs to go to people, right? Because they are customers ultimately. And so CSR's role has to be transformational. It has to be catalytic. Convert that beneficiary into a participant, convert that participant into a customer, convert that customer into a change agent. Let them make money, let the company make money, let the bank make money, let the Indian government make money, right? So fundamentally changing how we view people and how we use data to consistently empower them to make better decisions is really where we as a sector need to move collectively.
Thank you, Priya. Bhomik, over to you.
So I will keep it very straight and simple in terms of data, technology and transparency, because this is something which we try to use for a very purposeful catalytic role that we want to play. So when we talk about data, we have been working on the data at macro level in terms of where the CSR fund is moving, how thematic, geographic prioritization has been happening. But how do we use this data and insights to influence decision in the boardroom? So we have, since 2017 onwards, we have really been using intentionally this data to inform the decision makers at the board level or even the philanthropic organization. But beyond that, probably the third actor, which we generally don't realize that they are an actor in decision making, the policy makers or the people sitting in Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. Probably this is one thing which we have realized during our all interaction with companies, government relations head, or even people who are independent directors in the companies. They they are a very silent player in decision making. They influence the decision making a lot in terms of what to be done at the district level or at the constituency level. And one letter from a parliamentarian changes the narrative. Trust me, it has happened in multiple companies, not just PSUs, beyond the PSUs. So what happens that you need to make them informed about that how do they leverage data, leverage social sector investing for their political mileage as well. I'm using the political word, but this is how it works. So what we do is probably we identify a district or constituency. We identify each and every investment going from the social sector funders, be it CSR, be it philanthropy, or be it any other kind of existing model. We try to tell them this is how the investment is going on. How you can probably create a mechanism to attract more funding is probably you bring in some kind of leverage from systemic support. And you identify real needs in that particular constituency. You want to work on education, you want to work on farmers' problem, you want to work on something about higher education. Identify 2, 3 top priorities based on your local political leadership as well, or local cadre. Then we go back to them and tell them this is something which is already prioritized by the other funders. This is something which are the priority coming from your side. And what other demographic contextualization tell us. We use all these 3 layers to tell them probably if you are writing any letter to any company, use this data to tell them this is the need of this particular constituency. This is the problem that we are facing as people, not as a parliamentarian. And then probably it sets the new narrative for them to invest in that geography. And this has worked. So one, we are using this for driving more funding towards rightful sectors. Secondly, we are using this kind of approach to create advocacy and awareness among decision makers and influencers in the entire ecosystem. Now coming to data from technology, I'm an advocate of technology, but to the level that it should not paralyze the entire process. So what we try to do is we try to keep the minimum intervention or minimum involvement of technology at the initial level. Once the stakeholders become comfortable, once they adapt to the entire process, we take it to the next level. So it's divided into 2 to 3 phases as an intervention in the programmatic level. And how this technology does play a role in transparency and probably giving you that robustness in the social sector program. And I will steal the word from Krishna that if you are not using technology, probably you need to start rethinking about your existence. I will cite a real example where we are working in Bharuch district with district administration, where district administration anchors one large adolescent healthcare program. We work as an implementation partner through our own trust. There are other organizations which are involved in the project and program. The program which has been designed is in a way that each and every calendarization is there. Each and every hour of training program which is happening to the teachers, to students and Anganwadi workers, it's calendarized for next 3 months. The district magistrate has access to the calendar. It's linked with his personal calendar. His DA, his health officer, his education officer, everybody has access to the calendar. They do random visit, trust me. And why we are so vocal about this project or program, and we cite this example, because the funder has invested only X amount. They are getting almost 100x systemic support from the government side. That I am giving you 125 teachers, 8,000 students per block, while you deploy only 5 resources to the CSR funding. But create that kind of program which can be scaled up and replicated. We started with one block using this transparency model. This year we are doing the entire district. This has gone to government of Gujarat to be replicated all across Gujarat. So this is how, what I'm trying to probably connect is that data does help in sensitization, creating awareness, and probably set the new narrative. Technology does help you a lot in terms of bringing that transparency which is required in this sector. This sector is moving towards lot. I spoke about this. The sector is moving towards impact delivery a lot. We have been talking about numbers. We have been talking about uh, some creative stories. I call it creative stories because we know how we do it. So probably sector is moving towards the real impact on the on the last mile. And Priya has spoken about very hard numbers and how we need to change things. Krishna has spoken about using technology and probably new set of mindset which is coming. That India is becoming hub for the global south as well in the decision making. So India is also becoming a role model for other countries in terms of how social sector programs are implemented and how it can be replicated in larger scale geographies. And we will see that many of the India-centric programs going into global south to even the other countries in South American or African countries. So that's where probably there's an entire sector and probably the catalysts are trying to create data and technology driven approaches along with keeping the sector's agility alive. It should not paralyze the sector in terms of not having the capacity to use the technology in programmatic design or programmatic intervention. So that's where you will see most of us also work with many technology companies, many other tech entrepreneur and startup ecosystem, that we want to enable the ecosystem to the level that we bring in that kind of agility in the sector. I hope this helps.
Thank you, Bhomik. So I think all three panelists spent a lot of time talking about data, right? Data is the new oil, as the cliched saying goes, and the importance of having data from a transparency point of view, from an impact measurement point of view. They also spoke about technology is a tool, but it's also context sensitive. It's important to place technology in the context and utilize it in the context, right? And innovation has a big role to play in the work that we all are doing. And as participants in this sector, it's important for us to recognize the importance of data, of technology and innovation and embrace it rather than shun it. It is how the future will be decided. And to Krishna's point, if we want to have larger organizations, larger NGOs, it is important that these aspects are looked into. All right, good. Any last words from any of you before we open the floor for questions?
I will
Yeah?
just cite one last
Yes.
experience which we have on the basis of data. I think in last 10 years, and especially last 2, 3 years post-COVID, the age of non-profits is becoming redundant. Like I mentioned it yesterday as well, but for the larger group, it doesn't matter now you're 50-year-old organization or a 5-year-old organization. If you are compliant, that's all. Only 2, 3 years work and how you are able to communicate about last 2, 3 years ka work, that does matter. Your 47 years ka additional advantage doesn't work in the ecosystem anymore. And I think all of us have that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. All right. So thank you very much. You've been a patient audience. Open it up for questions. Yeah, do we have some mics
Yeah.
that?
Hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Shabir. Bhomik, I'm not following you, so don't worry. The question is to you, Krishna. That you talked about that there are some NGOs, who are into. There is only one NGO who's into 500 crores, and the others are just going down. The problem is, we have got that budget, and we are also good organization. I'm representing one of our people. So the question to you, on behalf of all those NGOs who have done very well, but the problem is they have not handled more than 1 crore. And the criteria comes, I was just looking at, no offense to HCL, the HCL grant, and then they said that if you are an NGO, if you are able to manage 3 crores in a year, then only you should apply. So now the question is like, it is like, choosing a cricket team and saying that, okay, if we have played a century, if we made a century, then only you can come to cricket team. And then you are saying that I think everybody should play and make centuries. So the question is, you got the question. Ki when the grants comes, there is a criteria, and it says that if you are an NGO who have managed 3 crores, then only you should apply. It's like not giving them a chance to apply at least and see if they can manage or not.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, here's the mic.
So I echo that question.
Yeah. So let me just say that, life as an entrepreneur, as a head of an organization is hard. Okay. If you don't want it, don't. Nobody helped me. When I went around, we were a small organization, I'm sure it's the same for these folks as well. We have enough stories of sweat, blood, wounds, to kind of show. Nobody came and said, oh, you're so small and we want to help you now grow, Because nobody did that, and you have to kind of fight that. You have to bring that skill to the table. It's a survival of who can actually, build that, right? There can be support ecosystems. There are many. Okay, and you also have to figure out what type of capital will be used for what, right? There are, I didn't share this data, but I'm happy to kind of share. India has 6,000 ultra HNIs. We are now building the database. Like there's 29,500 companies doing CSR. There are 6,000 ultra HNIs who are potentially having family offices. The data doesn't exist. Where do they exist? What do they do? Okay, a lot of them are actually supporting small NGOs and organizations. For them, they have no restrictions on where to put the money, how much money to put. They could support you on capacity building to a lot of that stuff. We are right now supporting a family office in Bombay to primarily do unrestricted giving for about 10 kind of non-profits, right? So there is money available. It will be, but it will not be so easily available. If you want easy money, again, shut down the shop, right? There's no easy money, no easy support available. You'll have to work hard. It can't get better than an ecosystem like this. That's my point, right? There's excessive money, right? And I was recently presenting a report in Europe on European CSR. Wahan pe budgets are reducing. CFO is not listening to you. If you're a CSR head here, your CFO is running behind you. Okay, it's much harder. And I always ask this quiz of, do you want to be on the fundraising side of a non-profit or on the CSR head of a large company? Most people want to be on the fundraising side. It's harder now to deploy money than to raise money. People are very happy to say, I would rather be on the fundraising side, because it's so much more difficult to deploy that money and get the utilization certificate by March 31st. So there are challenges on all sides. So we have to work through that.
Sure, thanks, Krishna. Bhomik, you want to add?
Just
Sir, my
quick
question
insight on this.
Th-
I presented report, 23% of funders said that non-profit could not use the 100% of the fund. So everything is based on the past experiences which companies do have. And there are very real insights where we work with companies, smaller non-profits getting high order projects for limited period of time, 1 year. Technically you get only 6-7 months when you work on one year ka project. So it's very difficult to get fund deployed in that time period and get the milestones delivered. So everything is based on that experience. So this is probably accepted approach in the sector. Even आप गवर्नमेंट के लिए जो अप्लाई करते 3 साल प्लस क्राइटेरिया रहता था, we being in sector for last 10 years in advisory space, we are still not eligible to apply for consulting for few of the large CSR foundation in India as of today. So this is for all, it is applicable for all of us. This criteria will be there, and I think I personally appreciate this criteria because this is all about having that capacity, internal process and system to deliver to that expectation.
thanks. So just one request.
One question.
Yeah, sure. Just one request. In the interest of time and to stay true to the topic of this particular panel, one of the things I learned very early on in my journey in the social development, there are always more questions than answers. right? And therefore, just to stay true to the topic of today's panel discussion, if you can have questions around that, please. Sure, please, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Onak. Yeah, yeah.
I think the gentleman in black, please.
My name is Balasaheb Takalkar. I'm president of Aramba NGO. My question is, many organizations, corporates, they are giving one condition that the NGOs turnover must be 2 crores.
Sir, we already addressed this.
The smaller NGOs must be given opportunity so
Sure,
that
sure.
they.
I agree. I think Krishna addressed this. Sir, you're.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Onak. Just quick introduction. Founding
If
team.
you can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are talking about a lot of data pointers here. Okay. My fear right now for the next 10 years is that while we are speaking about all of these data, we are not talking about the methodologies of how are we going to proceed with this data and how we are going to process this data. What are the tools and technologies that you are trying to use? More importantly, behavioral tools. Are these quasi-experimental data? Are these RCTs? What are we looking at? And I'm pretty sure Krishna has done his due research, which is his small, tiny black box, okay, which definitely it's fair for you to not list it out for 20 organizations because you might get into some funky business. So what are these tools that you're using? I'm not talking about the technologies, but tools. Yeah, that's my question. Thank you so much.
Okay, if I understand right, tools you mean like how do you kind of collect and deploy and make decisions using. Got it. So one for the small NGOs, with Bhomik's permission, I'm just going to say we've now recently, and this is dedicated to all the small NGOs who just asked the question. We built a platform called India Partner Network with Omidyar, Rockefeller, a few Indian foundations, Sattva, all co-investing, only dedicated to small NGOs to build capacity and help raise money, right? So please go register, and we'll see what as an ecosystem we can do, for you guys. But more importantly, there is a lot of India also has some, decent amount of secondary data. So you need to make sure that you have good access to secondary data. Again, we have tried to do that in indiadatainsights.com, all secondary data for India's development in one place. Niti Aayog uses it, many people use it, so please feel free to use that data. And that's an insight tool that's available for decision making. Even at a district level, you will find every possible SDG indicator, CSR spend in that particular place. The second is, there's a lot of data collected that Priya gave many examples and Bhomik gave examples of technology and tools being used, from a bottom up. What we need to learn and data skills in all of our organizations is the ability to triangulate, right? And there are many tools available, but insight and triangulation is really the skill capacity to build in all our ecosystems. So as we build and more, data sets will come out, more and more infrastructure will come out, but our ability to triangulate will become critical because each place will give you different sets of, insights and data. So today there are, I think, enough technological tools available from a data collection perspective from both primary and secondary, but bringing them together from an insight is where there's a bit of a gap, and I think that's something that as an ecosystem we have to do together. I don't think it's easy.
I think it's a part of the evolution, basically. It's not. There's no right answer to what
Happy
you're
to take it, offline.
Okay.
Hi, I have a question. Okay, my name is Divya, and I wanted to understand. I asked this question yesterday as well. What is the estimated impact of the social stock exchange? How is it going to change, and how is it going to work? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. So the basic, and I'll spend a little bit of time, not too much, but the basic premise behind the social stock exchange is three things. Okay. The first is transparency, which means that, like in a stock exchange, a person who is investing money into the shares of a company, they get transparency into the performance of that company. Usually it's financial performance. In this case, in case of the social stock exchange, it'll be social performance. So the first is transparency. The second is inclusivity, which means that many more people can participate in a fully transparent manner on the giving side, very importantly. The third is that it creates a level playing field for all NGOs. So going back to the points being raised about 2-3 crore NGOs versus the 100 crore NGO, if you think about it, the social stock exchange in its eventual avatar will have the same procedures, same rules, same financial structures across all NGOs, right? Those are the three premises on which the social stock exchange is based. However, to realize these three premises, I think we have to think beyond donations and grants, right? Today, and some of you are registered, thank you very much, on BSC, on the Social Stock Exchange, and some of you are also in the process of raising money using zero coupon, zero principal instruments. But I think the true we'll be able to leverage and create a larger impact of the social stock exchange once we start getting into blended finance instruments. Priya spoke about right, the returnable grants. She spoke about credit guarantees. So some of those things which where many more people will be able to participate at a much smaller cost per transaction is when the true power of the social stock exchange will get realized. Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much.
What, just one second.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one question. We're talking about data-led, transformation here. But is there a aversion to data from my own experience in the corporate world? People who consider themselves as subject matter experts. So let's say the grassroots level NGOs who are working, obviously they have that expertise, and they like to protect their data and do not like the idea that somebody else can come in and through data you can actually make a difference. It takes certain amount of time and there's a lot of deployment that needs to happen before the acceptance comes in. Do we see that challenge, and how are we looking at overcoming that?
I'll take a stab at it, but so see, I think that problem, you come from the corporate side, right? So I think that problem exists in all spheres of life. Data is not an end product in itself. Data is ultimately used to tell a story, correct? And to his point about tools and techniques, the analysis of data is equally important, and the subsequent story is even more important. Right? So therefore, this will exist. As long as humans exist, you will have this issue of what data to present, how to present it, and what story to tell will exist in all spheres of life. So I don't think that's something unique to this particular sector.
Okay. So we had that challenge when we began, right? So we had NGOs and we work with 500 of them. Said, this is my data. First of all, it's not their data. It is the participants' data, right? Because they have collected it from a person. So it's the person's data. Second, I mean, of course, people are fearful because they believe that it's their asset, and they should believe it's their asset. So our counter to that was, okay, you have this artisan, you're skilling her, great. If you don't share the data with anyone else, she will never receive anything beyond what you're giving. Is that what you want? Don't you want the same person to also benefit from credit and market linkages, etc., which you may facilitate, but you may not always deliver? So as long as we protect the interest of the NGO, and we have to be cognizant of that, because it's their deep relationship with their customer or their beneficiary that they value. So to create these mechanisms to say, how does data unlock benefits both for the people that you serve, but also for you as an institution? And so it was funny when we brought all of our NGO partners together in a room the first time, when we said we have this audacious dream of like doubling incomes of 10 million people. And the first day was on data and how everyone said, we're not going to share anything. At the end of that day, every NGO calculated how many people they are able to reach. And they said, but Priya, why are you saying 10 million? We can do 50 million together. If we share data, like I will do this and he will do this and he will do this, right? That's a magic of co-creation. So for everyone to understand that they are co-owners or co-custodians of a data, but it only creates value when it's shared carefully, but also aggressively across many, many people in the organizations. It takes time. We continue to struggle with data challenges, but my tech team is, they're very empathetic. They sit with every one of our NGO partners, their field workers, their participants, because the participants are also asking the question, क्यों चाहिए information? क्या करोगे आप किसी को बेच ना दोगे? I mean, these are very valid questions to ask. And the question is, how do you then create a series of trust, standards, data protection policies, right? How do you hold yourselves accountable to audit and then do it carefully, thoughtfully, always being compliant.
I had a question for
Sorry,
Srikrishna sir.
before you, this
There's-
lady here.
Yeah. Priya, first of all, thank you so much. You're the first person I'm listening to who's talking about a person centric approach. And I'll not say what hat I'm currently wearing, but I've been working in the NGO sector for the past 3 decades, helping them build their capacity, largely in M&E. And I must bring to the attention of the group here that you're trying to make a change in a system which has been used to a grants in aid scheme for maybe past 40 years or 50 years, and then suddenly we have a lot of money in the CSR sector, but when you're asking them to look at even a simple lock frame, which is so easy in a corporate language to understand, it's a very, very challenging task. So how do you, even today, the government programs are asking for monitoring and evaluation indicators. They gave you a preset of indicators because even if you want to access a grants and ends scheme, you have to show impact. Now the language has changed on the government. A sector which has not been used to M&E is now getting used to an M&E. And then comes another actor in the CSR space, the CSR actors. And then you are measuring impact the way, the language and the terms you talk about, the CSR players, they're totally confused. So I don't know, it's a suggestion for Bhomik. If you can look, this is very exciting, you've got platforms, you've got IITs. Now there is no information available with the small sector players on, that there are these platforms available to build their capacity. For example, what Srikrishna said, just does not exist. We still get hired. I, as a consultant, still get hired, and I've worked with the USAIDs and with the UN for past 30 years of my professional career. We still get hired through the same agencies. It's just that some of our love and passion for the small sector, small NGOs, keeps us driving. But these people have no idea. So for them to access, you will keep on getting, questions like 2 crore and 3 crore,
So,
the kind
ma'am,
of questions.
I'm sorry
you
to
get.
interrupt.
That's a panel discussion in itself, and you can do a one-day discussion, on
Correct.
that topic.
If it's okay with you, one last question.
I had a question for Srikrishna sir.
You have a question? I'm sorry, before.
I was just saying your point, it just resonated with me when you said top 200 NGOs and the money going to them, and beyond them it's very less. So I had a question, like in development economics we say that there is a missing middle problem, and there's a duality where top firms have more productivity and lower SMEs have productivity, and there's a missing middle. So do you think with NGO sector it is also the same problem?
I think the middle and the top is missing. The top is too lean and the middle is missing, right?
Okay.
That's the problem, right?
So I have a question for all three of you, Priya, Bhomik, Srikrishna. Bhomik said that 60% of BSc companies are all three of your clients combined, right?
More, but yeah.
More, probably. But I just want to understand how all three of you are working together to deliver good in a better way in terms of next 10 years. Three of you combined, Samhita, Sattva.
So
CSRBOX.
firstly, whenever Bhomik calls, I pick the call, and he says, come here, I come here. Whatever he says, I do. But, it's interesting, Priya took the example of 361, and on the other side of 361 is Sattva team, right? So we manage 361 CSR. We advised them and worked with Soumya to create, this whole philosophy, which kind of is now eventually is the partnership with Samhita. But to your point, we are not collaborating enough, and that's how we started the morning today. We should be collaborating a lot more.
So let me just respond very quickly. 15 years ago when I moved to India, my first pitch to an HNI was create a fund for intermediaries. Because if you don't create a fund for intermediaries, we then don't create the standards, the protocols, the language, the metrics that actually then influence all of the other actors that we work for, right? That time everyone laughed at me and said, that's not going to happen, but I think it should. Because if you don't have, the stock exchange is a great example. What is a stock exchange, right? It ensures that standards are created that the larger ecosystem holds themselves accountable to. So we actually need mechanisms that enable us to come together. Also, the reality is a lot of us compete. And because we compete, we're constantly figuring out how do we not compete with each other but find something else to do. I mean, today, in all honesty, we've really dialed down the CSR business because there are very able organizations on the other side. So I think it's both questions, which is how do you continue to compete because, then you step up the game, right? You're seeing a lot more efficiencies, delivering more values. But within that competition, how do you find opportunities for collaboration? Because I think Bhomik said it. We're not here to make the money, right? All of us could be making many times the money if we were not here. We're here because of this one united passion. How do you now not solve each of these problems individually, but solve them collectively? And I think maybe that's what the next CSR box event should be about.
So I'll just take it up. So while Priya and Krishna mentioned that we work in this sphere, we are not exactly working as a collaborator among ourselves, but I think there are multiple examples where we work as an implementation partner on certain sites. Sattva is sitting on PMU. Similarly, we are implementing project for a client and Samhita is doing the PMU role. So there are many roles where we are counterpart or complementary organization for a corporate client. So definitely, as Priya mentioned, we try to avoid competition and because we really want that if somebody is taking the lead among three of us, let that organization take the lead and we go on the backstage. That's a very intentional call. I think we have never spoken about this one-on-one, but this very intentional call that we all three have taken internally that we don't compete with each other when it comes to open bidding. Secondly, about collaboration, yes, we have started something, some discussion on this direction. Probably a couple of months down the line, you will hear something more on collaboration. Yeah, and that's for Bharat for APEC. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. And I think just to close out on what Bhomik was saying, today morning's discussions among the four of us was three topics: collaboration, standards, and global reach. Maybe that's a topic for next year's. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.